Chapter 30, Paths of Suspicion and Alliance. The march was long and silent. The enemy group forced Kyle, Lyanna, and Dren to walk among them without bindings, yet with enough veiled threats to make it clear that any attempt to escape would end in death. Ether had perched atop a fir tree when they were captured. From there, he followed the rebels in silence, barely moving his head as he watched every step. The forest grew darker as they advanced. The path narrowed between ancient, moss-covered trunks, and the sound of the river slowly faded behind them. The men escorting them did not speak to one another, as if trained to communicate without words. Hoods concealed most of their faces, and some walked with bows drawn and angled toward the ground, ready to raise them in an instant. Dren, walking between two of them, kept his hands where they could see them. His expression blended resignation with a hint of irritating confidence. "What in the hell are we doing, Dren?" Kale asked, low enough that only Lyanna could hear. "Do you actually have a plan? Or are you just waiting to see if you can sell us out and make a run for it?" Dren frowned, offended. "Kale, please. Sell you out? I would never do something so terrible as hand Lyanna over to these people." Lyanna let out a brief, soft laugh. Kale didn't find it funny. "Only Lyanna?" he asked seriously. Dren opened his mouth, then closed it. "Well, one has priorities," he replied with a roguish smile that failed to hide a grain of truth. Then he added quickly, "But you'll stop growling once you understand this. We've been lucky." Lyanna stared at him in disbelief. "Lucky? We're surrounded, unarmed, with no leverage, and we're prisoners. Which part of this is the luck?" Dren nodded slightly toward one of the men walking ahead. "These aren't bandits. They're not raiders. They're not starving, desperate, or drunk on power. They're rebels. Rebels who hate King Edramon and Galathor's monster. And that," he raised his brows, "can work in our favor." Kel frowned. "Rebels? How do you know they won't just hang us for association?" "Because if they were thugs without a cause, we'd be dead already. And because their boots are far too uniform for thieves. And because their leader," he gestured ahead, "walks like a soldier who stopped being one not long ago." Lyanna studied the men more closely. Their pace, their formation, even the way they scanned their surroundings. Yes, there was military discipline there. Something in her urged her to ask, "And you plan to convince them we're allies?" "Exactly," Dren replied. "They hate Galathor, so do we. They want to destabilize the king. We want to rescue someone captured by the Order of the Ravens, which is practically the same thing as opposing Galathor. I just need to put the words in the right order." Lyanna took a deep breath. "I hope it works." Her voice wavered slightly. "We can't lose time. Selenia, she could be suffering." Kyle briefly touched her arm in support. Dren, for the first time on the entire journey, fell silent. Above them, Ether tilted his head. From on high, the hawk watched as the rebels guided them toward a narrow trail, as though the forest itself were forming a dark tunnel. From there, he followed his three companions, patient, alert, unable to intervene, yet ready to act if necessary. The tavern where Alden, Doran, and Sarah were staying was a sturdy building of smoke-blackened stone, with thick beams supporting a low ceiling and a multitude of hanging lamps that cast a warm, boisterous glow. The place was packed with dwarves shouting over one another, clashing tankards, laughing until they were out of breath, and arguing as if every sentence were the opening blow of a battle. Doran held a tankard in one hand, another half empty before him. He smiled as though nothing bad could possibly happen in the world. "By my ancestors' beards," he said with his mouth full, "this is without question the best food I've had outside home. Did you try this stew, Alden? 3 kinds of roots and something they call black salt. Magnificent!" Sarah watched him in disbelief, holding her mug with both hands and drinking sparingly. "I don't understand how you can eat that much," she said, "especially after you drank twice as much as I did." "Because I'm half dwarf," Doran exclaimed, as if that explained everything. Alden, who had barely touched his soup, seemed lost in his own thoughts. His mind lingered on the audience with King Doran Hramson. "I can't stop thinking about tomorrow," he finally admitted. "What if something goes wrong? I'm nobody important. What if the king decides not to listen to us?" Doran rolled his eyes. Alden, my friend, you worry too much. Dwarves are stubborn, yes, but in the end, they do what's right. And when they meet the lad who stood against the Order of the Ravens and the Vircaths without backing down, he fixed Alden with exaggerated solemnity. They won't be able to resist those heroic eyes of yours. Sira crossed her arms. Heroic eyes, she repeated. Seriously? Doran winked at her. You noticed too. He managed to crack that tough shell of yours, didn't he? Sira choked on a drop of beer. What? I haven't cracked any shell. I'm exactly the same. And I have no idea what you're talking about. Doran raised his cup, satisfied. I do. Alden smiled faintly. The banter helped, even if his unease didn't fade. Just then, the tavern door opened and Bourne appeared through the crowd, dusting off his clothes. Good news and bad news, he announced. Alden straightened at once. Give me the good news first. Bourne puffed out his chest with pride. I secured an audience with His Majesty, King Durin Hramson. Doran lifted both tankards to the ceiling. I knew it. Dwarves always recognize greatness when they see it. Alden smiled with relief. Sira seemed to relax a little as well. That's wonderful, Alden said. When will we see him? Bourne's smile faded. That's the bad news. I don't know yet. Doran stopped smiling. Alden blinked. What do you mean you don't know? They told me the king will receive us, but not when. Bourne raised both hands. It could be tomorrow, in 2 days, or in a couple of weeks. They're not very specific with official matters. They're dwarves. It's normal. Alden pressed his lips together. Sira let out a frustrated sigh. I know, Bourne continued. But that's how things work here. Take it easy. Enjoy the city. Eat, drink, rest. Make the most of being in the cradle of the finest forges in the world. Doran lifted his tankard again. Well, works for me. Alden had no choice. He glanced toward the window, toward the mountain lit by chimneys, and he thought of Kale, of Lyanna, of the uncertainty that kept growing. Dren, Kale, and Lyanna were led to a clearing hidden behind a rocky outcrop. There, among towering trees, the rebels had established a camp large enough to house several dozen men. There were extinguished fire pits, discreet tents smeared with mud and leaves to blend into the surroundings, and a lookout system in the trees that spoke of experience and organization. The hooded man who had captured them guided them to a tent slightly larger than the rest. 2 guards pulled back the canvas and ushered them inside. There, seated on a wooden bench, was a young man, no more than 30 perhaps, with piercing hazel eyes and dark hair tied into a short braid. He wore no mask or hood. His posture was relaxed, but there was a coiled tension in his gaze as though every movement in the world might be an enemy. So these are the 3 travelers walking through our territory as if they wanted to stay hidden, he said evenly. The guards nudged Kyle, Lyanna, and Dren forward. Dren stepped ahead with his customary diplomatic smile. Good evening, sir. He gave a slight bow. My name is Dren, and these are my 2 young clients, Kyle and Lyanna. I didn't ask for your names, the man replied. I asked what you're doing so far from the main roads. People who avoid official routes usually carry secrets, and secrets, his eyes narrowed, can be dangerous. Kyle felt Lyanna's fingers tense beside him. Dren cleared his throat. The Order of the Ravens is holding someone important to them, he said, gesturing to Kale and Lyanna. We're trying to rescue her. The man's lips curled into an incredulous smile. 3 people against the Order of the Ravens? Just 3? If you told me you planned to hunt a dragon naked, I'd find that more reasonable. Dren took a small step back. Kale clenched his jaw. We'll do whatever it takes, Lyanna said, her voice steady despite its tremor. The risk doesn't matter. The man studied her closely. And who is this person worth so much sacrifice? Kale stepped forward. The Oracle of Arendor. The air seemed to tighten. The man's smile vanished. So it's true, he murmured. We heard rumors the Order had been seen near the temple, but not that the prisoner was the Oracle. That changes things. Lyanna stepped closer. You saw them? How long ago? A few days. They were heading toward the tower. They had a prisoner. We tried to intercept them. Intercept them? Lyanna felt a knot form in her chest. Did you try to kill her? The man didn't answer at once, then calmly. When something or someone is valuable to Galathor, there are two options: recover it or destroy it. Darkness cannot be allowed to use what gives it power. Sometimes mercy and sacrifice look far too similar. Rage and pain rose together in Lyanna's throat. We'll rescue her, Kyle said. We don't need her dead to protect her. The man leaned his elbows on his knees. The three of you alone won't accomplish anything. The order doesn't stop. It doesn't tire. It doesn't fear. Dren gently raised a hand. But perhaps with help, we might. The rebel leader studied them in silence. A long pause stretched. Finally, he spoke. My name is Valor Rindar, and perhaps, just perhaps, we can come to an agreement. But that will depend on whether you can prove you truly fight against Galathor and not in his service. Dren smiled, satisfied. I like how that sounds. I think we're very close to having a plan, or to being executed. Either way, it sounds promising. Lyanna and Kale exchanged a glance, and the dim firelight of the tent seemed to lean toward them, as if sensing that, for the first time in a long while, they had something that resembled an opportunity.